Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing the synastry chart between Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson. Now before I get started on the asteroids, I want to mention that they have a Venus conjunct Neptune aspect between the two of them. This indicates a highly romantic bond. However, it can also represent the over-idealization of the image that the Venus person represents or projects onto the Neptune. And since she is the Neptune in this case, there is a strong indication that she sees him through rose-colored glasses. Now, the best case scenario when you have Venus conjuncting Neptune in your compatibility chart is a strong, unforgettable romance that borders on a fairy tale-like connection. But usually there is definitely an over-idealization between the two, and they see each other through rose-colored glasses, and they have this idealization that the other person is the perfect match for them. But over time, it's not sustainable. So I'm going to get started on the asteroids. Now, his Volus conjuncts her Lamia, and Volus explodes whatever it touches. And in this case, her Lamia, and Lamia has to do with pain and suffering. So that's what he brought into this relationship. Now, in her natal chart, this is really interesting. In her 8th house, which rules sex, there are two asteroids holding hands, and those are Tape and Salicea. Salicea has to do with shocking, scandalous, sexual, salacious behavior. And it's conjuncting her Tape. So right there, it's validated by the scandal that broke out between the two of them, video recording their intimate acts. Her Salicea is also conjuncting his midheaven, 3 degrees. Now, whatever conjuncts your midheaven from the other person, if you're not famous, the general public will end up seeing these energies. But if you are famous, it'll break out way out in the open, it'll be released in the media, and everyone will know about it. So in this case, the Tape, it went into the internet and it was stolen, and a lot of people saw what happened between the two of them when they were on holiday. And speaking of holidays, her holiday asteroid conjuncts his bride, 0 degrees. So this is fascinating as well because they got married on a beach in Cancun. So he brought her a wedding, and she became his bride. Now, his Sirius and Xanthopy conjuncts her IC. Whatever conjuncts your IC happens behind the scenes because it sits at the very bottom of the chart and it's opposing the midheaven. So his Sirius, this has to do with unconditional love, but it's also holding hands with Xanthopy, which has to do with domestic abuse. So over time, the Xanthopy asteroid stepped in, and there was domestic abuse, and it happened behind the scenes because no one saw it. They have Mars square Mars between the two of them at 3 degrees. And this also validates that energy because Mars squaring Mars can result in the beginning a very sexy sort of pull. And there's a tension there, but over time it can result in ego clashes, war, and possible violence, which happened in this case between the two of them. Her Uranus and Wild conjuncts his Medea, 0 degrees. And Uranus, that planet, very unpredictable. You never know what to expect. And all of a sudden, things could break out like a hurricane, thunder and lightning, and it's conjuncting her Wild. So, her Uranus conjuncting his Medea, which has to do with the revenge. He suddenly broke out wild with revenge. Also, her Ishtar and D Arrest conjuncts his Sun, 2 degrees. And the Sun is a very important luminary. So Ishtar has to do with blow-ups and arguments. And there was an arrest over this whole situation because of the abuse and a huge argument that they had in their home. Her Mars conjuncts his Lucifer, Sphinx, Bacchus, Grieve, and Lamia. Lamia again. So there's this energy is now coming to play, and he felt a lot of pain as well because her Mars, the war planet, it also brings fire and power to whatever it conjuncts. So it's conjuncting his Lamia and Grieve. So after he went to jail due to the arrest, I think that he felt really bad about it, and there was grieving and pain associated. But her Mars is also conjuncting his Lucifer, so he can be a know-it-all, and there's an arrogance about him. And Sphinx is there, so he's like an enigma to her, and he can portray this energy that's very secretive. Also, it's conjuncting his Bacchus, and Bacchus has to do with an overindulgence. So into this relationship, he brought overindulgence as well, and that has to do with, I've explained Bacchus before. It's like when you go to a bar, you don't have just one shot or one glass of wine. You overdo it, and that's a lot of the energies came into play with this relationship because his Venus conjuncts her Bacchus as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So now I'm going to go to his Venus conjuncting her Neptune, but her Neptune is also holding hands with Clytia and Bacchus. So she brought overindulgence into this relationship as well in a fantasy sort of way, which coincides with their drinking, their partying, the tape, and their over-the-top indulgence between the two of them in a fantasy sort of way. Now, her Neptune is also holding hands with Clytia, and that asteroid represents, there's resentfulness involved here. So I think due to her looking at him with the rose-colored glasses, and then over time, what happened was she realized that the image she thought she saw was really not there. She woke up from the Neptune fog over time and became resentful due to the shock of realizing that what she thought was there really wasn't. But she did love him, which I will get to. But I want to do this next aspect first. His Neptune and Fox, James Bond conjuncts her vertex 2 degrees. And whatever conjuncts your vertex from the other person, those energies you will feel strongly. So again, we have Neptune here again as well. With Fox, cunning behavior, and Fox can also mean seeing women as sex objects. And James Bond conjuncting her vertex, sly, cunning, he probably was slinking behind the scenes or spying on her. Maybe it was after the relationship or during the relationship, but those energies are there, combined with Neptune, fantasy and illusion. Her Grimm and North Node conjuncts his ascendant at 0 degrees. Again, Grimm, fairy tales, illusions, ties back to the Neptune conjuncting Venus aspect. Now, Grimm is conjuncting her North Node, so in her life, there was a lot of fantasy and fairy tale-like energies that surround her. Whatever conjuncts your North Node in your natal chart, those energies will be very strong throughout your life. It'll be a core fabric. And her North Node is conjuncting his ascendant. It's a fated bond. And since Grimm is also conjuncting his ascendant, again, ties back to the Neptune Venus, fairy tales and fantasy. Her Dionysus and Astarte his Dionysus and Astarte conjuncts her Sun, 0 degrees. Dionysus, partying, drinking. Astarte, blow-ups and arguments. And this is conjuncting her Sun at 0 degrees. It's a very tight orb, and the Sun is a very important luminary. So in the relationship, this ties back to the arguments they had at the home and the abuse. So to me, I would say that a lot of these arguments that happened, he was probably too much drinking involved, because that's what Dionysus represents. Her storm, Ceres, Jupiter, and Alma conjuncts his north node. Whatever conjuncts your north node from the other person, that will be the theme of the relationship for you. So her storm conjuncting his north node, there was a lot of storms in this relationship. Her Ceres and Jupiter and Alma conjuncts his north node. So she had an unconditional love for him in a huge way, because it's holding hands with Jupiter, and Alma is there as well. So she brought a lot of love, soul, in a huge way towards him. And she really did love him. Now, his Sedna conjuncts her moon at 1 degree. And this is not a very, it's disappointing and heartbreaking, because Sedna has to do with betrayal and separation. And since it's conjuncting her moon at 1 degree, very tight, he broke her heart. And I also, again, goes back to the Neptune-Venus conjunction and him not being able to sustain the image that he projected towards her. It fell apart. Now, his Mars conjuncts her Dejanira and Astarte, and this ties back to, it's a double whammy, because his Mars, it's a war planet, and it's conjuncting her Dejanira and Astarte. So she was a victim of arguments between the two of them. Her point of fortune conjuncts his Uranus at 0 degrees. So I've already told you about the energies of Uranus, very unstable. So she didn't know what to expect from him. All of a sudden, he would just break out and become something different than what she thought he was. And the point of fortune is like a mini Jupiter. It magnifies whatever it touches. Now, his Uranus is also conjuncting his Eros and lust. So there's a very strong sexual component between the two of them. But over time, the Neptune fog was lifted and their relationship broke apart. And they don't have any Saturn glue to tie this relationship together long term. So that's all I have. And I hope you enjoyed this interpretation. And I will be back soon with more Synastry charts. Hit the subscribe button if you're interested to stay in the loop. Have a nice day.